This is the concierge, sir.
And welcome, everybody. This is Concierge Confidential. I'm your host, Brian Ortega. And in this week's episode, I hope you enjoy movies because we're going to be talking about things that happen in Vegas movies and if they could happen now. So there's a lot of movies out there about Las Vegas, Vegas Vacation, Casino, Showgirls, The Hangover. All these movies have certain cliches built into the film about Las Vegas and depict things that could or could maybe not happen in the wonderful city of sin. So I'm going to be going through explaining if that could actually happen, if it still does happen, and if you should be on the lookout for if it happens when you come to Las Vegas. So I'm going to jump into that. I'll also give you a little update of what's kind of going on in the city at the moment. I actually just walked around the center part of the Strip on a Saturday, and I do have some thoughts. So we're going to jump into it coming up next. All right, everybody, so let's go ahead and dive into it. So, little update on the Las Vegas Strip. Today is September 21st. Do you remember? I know. I heard it all day today. So, today's been my first Saturday off in a while. So, I was actually able to go out to the Las Vegas Strip pretty early in the morning. It was about, 10:30. I know I'm an overachiever. So, I know it's not that early, but I went out. I wanted to watch a couple of the college football games just because part of my job is, just knowing what's going on. And can we just talk about, again, if you haven't seen this episode where I talked about trying to find a place to watch NFL and college football, make sure to go back in the archives. It's only like maybe 3 or 4 podcasts ago where I explained some of the better places to watch the games. But being somebody who goes out sort of sporadically, I tried to just sort of walk out and watch the games, and I'm glad I did, just because I really wanted to know what it's like to be you guys coming to Vegas and not having local alternatives to go watch the games. It's a little tough, I would have to say. I called my dad about it, and he's like, "Oh, well, what about Green Valley Ranch?" I'm like, "Dad, that doesn't count. That's off the Strip. Of course you can find places to watch the games off of the Strip. We have plenty of sports bars. We have plenty of local spots. We're able to find it." But honestly, most of the people who listen to this podcast, or you, if you're listening to this right now, obviously, you're going to be on the Strip. You're going to be downtown. Not a lot of people listen to my pod and will stay at, let's just say Green Valley Ranch, just because, again, you have a minimal amount of time. You might be staying there. Fantastic. But I went out to center of the Strip. I parked at Cosmopolitan, walked over to the Paris Hotel, which, not a bad walk. It was a nice morning also. I just really wanted to be outside. But of course, you walk through Cosmopolitan. Their bar tops are taken, which is fine. It's first come, first serve there. But then you also have the stand-up tables are reserved. The tables in front of the TVs are reserved. The chairs are reserved. And again, it's a smaller sort of sports grill style sports book, which you hear me say that a lot. Like, what is a sports grill style? So, bar and grills, basically like an Applebee's or like a Twin Peaks or a Hooters. That's what I'm referring to when I say sports bar style, where it's essentially like a restaurant but has lots of TVs and is able to accommodate both things. Back in the day, a sports book, especially when I was growing up in the 90s and the 2000s, which was sort of like peak sports books, what I think a sports book looks like for me, honestly. Really big room, like a gigantic room, lots of TVs on the board, really gigantic TVs. And there really was not a lot of order to it. Like, yeah, you had some like leather chairs that would be reserved for some people. They would have like the race book, which was off to the side, which usually had its own personal TVs, and they had like seats that were reserved for certain people, which that was normal. That was like, it has a TV, it has a thing. It's a whole setup. But you were still able to go in, stand up, stand at the bar, sit at the bar, whatever you want. Didn't have to make a reservation, kind of just first come, first serve, and watch the games. You don't get that anymore. It's really, really hard to find places to watch any of the games, and I feel really bad for anybody visiting Las Vegas who doesn't come with a plan for that. And I totally get it. It's not something that you think you would have to plan for, and I usually don't have to plan for these things. You're able just to walk in and find a spot. I went to the beer park, which is at the Paris Hotel, and it's probably going to be busy, but it's sort of one of those things like where it's like not always the busiest place, beer park. It's sort of like people forget about it. But as you go in from the start, and I know this is the point of it, it's just very off-putting. You go on the outside entrance, there's a hostess with a with a bouncer there, and just feels like unfriendly. Like it just feels unfriendly to go inside, just because of all these sort of parameters. And you guys know me. Like I just walk into places, no big deal. But adding this extra layer is just for like watching football games is quite an inconvenience, and it's quite, again, like I said, off-putting. So I listen in. Essentially, it's going to be 2-hour maximum, 20% or whatever, 10% service charge added on to the bill. All these rules. Also, the first thing they asked was, do you have a reservation? And it's just like, come on, guys. Like, why are we making this so difficult? Why is this such an issue? Just let people walk in. You'll get the same amount of business. You don't need a reserve for days like this. And it's just becoming an extra layer that people have to go through just to want to watch football games. Again, this is sort of like, I don't want to call it the nickel and diming of people in Las Vegas, but that's what it feels like. It feels like, oh, because I didn't have to plan this 3 weeks out, now I'm not going to be able to watch any of the games. Where do I watch them now? Not a lot of sports books are very accessible like they used to be. They're all changed. It's really, really difficult. So then I had to walk, because I wanted to be out, I had to walk in front of the Paris Hotel, which, update on this is really important if you're going to be visiting in the next couple of weeks, I would say between now and November. But right now, you can walk in on the Paris side of the strip, which that would be the east side. It's extremely tight. It's very narrow. A lot of people. And then once you get to the Horseshoe Hotel, there's more construction where you have to sort of snake through like a hamster in a hamster wheel or a hamster cage. And then you get to the other side where then they have Voila, Ole Red, which is now covered. It's just completely covered on one side, which is not worth it. And then you get to the spot where you actually go up the escalators, and voila, the escalators are broken. So that was annoying. And then I just sort of run through my mind of all the places that I can watch the games at. So then you think like, oh, Caesars. Well, they have an open space. It's nice, but you can only get those seats that are at the bar. And am I going to be sitting there for that long? Probably not. Then you keep on walking, go into the Bellagio. Their sports book, it's owned by MGM. MGM properties love to rent out their spaces or charge per seat. I'm not sitting there either. Although they do have a nice little bar that my dad likes to sit at and watch like NASCAR and college football and whatever. But again, they're small TVs. It's just not the vibe you're looking for. And then so you think that. Then you go to Cosmo. Already been there. Not a lot of places to watch the games. Then, if you think you're going to go to Park MGM, they're also a bar and the grill set up for their sports book. Probably not going to find a space there either. Then you have to just continue to walk down the very next place you'll be able to watch games where you don't have to have a reservation are going to be places like MGM Grand, which MGM Grand Sportsbook is trash, and then Mandalay Bay, which is at the very end of the strip. So, really, if I have to think that hard to try to watch these games, we have a problem. So I think Vegas as a whole has a sportsbook problem. Why do we have these problems, by the way? One of the major reasons being is that it's millennials. Millennials coming to Vegas, by the way, I am a millennial, sort of like right in the center. Millennials want things a certain way, and they do not want the old school style sportsbook, big, airy. They like to eat. They like to hang out. It's sort of like a hangout culture nowadays. So they want the sportsbook to feel more approachable. They don't want it to be a place in the casino where, the executives don't want it to be at a place in a casino where this is just where old people go. They want it to be like a hangout spot, a fun spot to hang out at. And what do young people like to hang out at? Bars. So they want it to sort of look and feel like a sports bar back home, which aesthetically for them, good for them, but that's shit. I really don't like it. It really irritates me. Just because, again, I hate having to reserve a space. It's really ridiculous, especially I'm a single person walking through. I want to be able to walk in, stand up, have a drink, whatever. Can't do that in those type of places just because there's no place to lean. There's no place to stand at the bar. It's just really, really difficult. Also, number 2 is the sports betting apps. You don't need as many tellers, so you don't need a big giant board like you used to have, which was nice. They don't have sheets anymore, which is really annoying for us sports bettors. The thing is like people say, oh, we'll just get the app. The thing is, when you get the app in Nevada, again, this is like very tangent of what I wanted to talk about today, but if you get the app in Nevada, it's not the same as getting the app in, like, let's just say Pennsylvania or New York. It's a totally different app. It does not transfer, so you have to sign up all over again. And unless you're coming to Vegas frequently, you're going to have to sign up, load money onto the app, bet, and then go from there. People always say, well, they'll always tell you when you come to Vegas, because they're always trying to get you to sign up for the app at BetMGM Properties, is they'll say, oh, well, you can use this in your home state. So my dad actually did that, where he loaded money onto a BetMGM app and then went back to Arizona and then tried to use it, or he went to Arizona and then tried to use it in Nevada and wasn't able to use that money. So it does not transfer. So that's very, very annoying, especially from Arizona to Nevada. That's a thing that happens very frequently. So it might happen in your states, like let's just say New Jersey to New York. Again, that's still crossing jurisdictions. But it's extremely difficult to take your money back out when you go back home. So it's very annoying. It's very, very annoying. So just keep that in mind. Looking for places to watch the games, very, very annoying. People always point out Circa. Circa is a great place, which it is. It's fantastic. But it's built that way. It's built to have that sort of rent a spot, get it for the whole day. It's stadium seating. That's the way that it works. That's the way it's built. All these other places, I just don't enjoy the setups, which I don't like. I do like the setup at Circa in terms of the TVs. Don't like the seating, but that's just I'm one person. Most people like to sit, and they give plenty of options, which is a huge, huge deal. So that was my tangent of what was going on in Las Vegas at the moment. So hopefully that helped. But we're going to be jumping into the rest of the episode. We're going to go through all these movies, explaining if you can do it or can't do it now in Las Vegas. So that will be coming up next. Okay, everybody, so let's go ahead and dive into our movie breakdowns. So let's start with one that most people who've listened to this podcast have watched at least once, and let's start with Vegas Vacation. So Vegas Vacation, classic Chevy Chase film. It also has D'Angelo in it. Forgot her first name, sorry. But she was married to Al Pacino, just for everybody who knows. But anybody who knows me really knows that I really love movies, and I also love Las Vegas. I wish there was more ways that I can put these together, but hey, what can you do? If I turn this into a movie podcast, I'm sure you Vegas folks would hate it, and those of you who follow me for movie stuff would hate the Hotel Las Vegas stuff. So this is how we're going to mash them together. So in Vegas Vacation, I'll give you sort of a scenario that happens in the movie, and then I'll tell you if you can still do it. So one that is actually kind of funny if you look at it, is cashing a check, which obviously those of you who are really young listening to this may not, have ever, cashed a check before. But for those of you that have been around the block once or twice, know what it's like to cash a check or use checks to pay for stuff. So in the movie, Clark Griswold runs out of money and goes to the front desk and tries to cash a check. This actually was quite common, and you were able to do this, obviously, from the movie. But even up until maybe a couple years ago, I would say 5 years ago, you were still able to cash checks at local casinos. So if you lived in obviously local parts of town, you can go to Sunset Station and go to the cashier's cage, and they would be able to cash their check there. So they also had these little promotions where I don't know if they really don't do it anymore. You can cash your check, and then you can spin a wheel to see if you get double your check or some type of weird thing. So that was always kind of a funny thing. But yes, at one point you were able to cash checks in casinos. I haven't tried, and most people for the most part wouldn't do this anymore. Obviously, I would say you can't do this because I haven't tried it, because what for? We now have debit cards, which essentially are like checks, but even the next level of a check. We have credit cards, which you can use in ATMs. Same thing with debit cards. You can use debit cards at cashier's cages as well. They do have a fee. It works the same way. So, in a sense, you can cash checks, sort of, as long as you have your debit card. But it's just like using an ATM. So just like anything else. So you're not able to do that very much anymore, and they probably wouldn't let you. It was funny in the movie that the thing is that she's like, only if you're staying at the hotel, sir. And it's like, oh, of course. So that was funny. So let's move on to a couple other things. So the other one that's really popular in the movie is when Nick Papagiorgio, which is Rusty Griswold, he wins 4 cars. So he actually wins 4 cars for his entire family. So not for his family, they're really just for him with his fake ID. By the way, if you had a fake ID and try to do all that, good luck. But in the 90s, very possible. Nowadays, not as much. If you ever win a jackpot in Las Vegas by chance, they do check your ID. They'll also check if you have a player's card. That's always kind of the thing they really like to have first. But if you don't, they'll check your ID, make sure you're 21. They also have to check through the IRS to make sure you are you. Sometimes you have to carry your social security number around. Back in the day, my mom would always have to have my dad's social security card so we knew and could verify that this was him when he would win like horse racing bets, sports betting sometimes, but really it was horse racing bets. And they would have to verify you were you with your social security card. So they say don't carry around your social security card unless you're cashing out a jackpot. But that was always a big deal, was that you had to have your social security back in the day. Nowadays, we do have players cards, which help track you a little bit easier. But yes, they do take down a lot of information, and you can either pay then or you pay later. Most people just take the payout and then pay the taxes later. They take the little slip. But winning cars. You can no longer win cars in Las Vegas, unfortunately. Like if you walk around, I mean, I remember when I was walking around Vegas back when I was like, 14, 15, 16, specifically at the Park MGM, they had this Wheel of Fortune, which was like this big giant wheel. And they also had like the Wheel of Fortune, just sort of kiosks. That was part of it, the interface. Then they had the big giant wheel, and then they had the car on top of it. And it was usually like a Corvette. Corvette was very, very popular, but they had a lot of like sports cars. That was always kind of the thing. And there was always a Corvette. I always remember Corvettes were a big deal. And you could win a car. The thing was that you could win the car, or you could win like the cash value of the car. But the thing was that if you won the car, then you had to pay the taxes on the car. So it became very, very complicated to be winning cars. So for the most part, you can no longer win cars in Las Vegas. You just don't see them around. It also takes up a huge chunk of the casino if you put a car in the middle of it, and that's one game. And we'd rather put a lot more slot machines in those spaces. So you really can't win cars anymore. But jackpots, still a very big deal. And again, you need your social. So if your name is Nick Papagiorgio and you are from Yuma, Arizona, you probably have a couple cars waiting for you. So another one I outlined was the front desk. So there is a scene in the front desk of Vegas Vacation that the front desk agent, which that hotel's no longer here, the Mirage, which it's sort of sad, and for me, because I feel like I'm getting old now, that when you look at the Mirage or look at the movie Vegas Vacation, it's really when the Mirage was just it. It was like the win of its time, because it opened in 1989, and the movie itself came out, I think, in 95 or 96, and we had not built the Bellagio yet. We had a lot of stuff that wasn't built that is now modern, but the Mirage itself was beautiful. It had this beautiful entrance with, of course, the volcanoes. It had world-class entertainment like Siegfried and Roy, and they, of course, have their beautiful front desk that had this giant aquarium that just went with that whole like Mirage sort of thought, sort of that water feel. So like tropical essentially. And you could see it in that movie, which is very nice. But he checks in, and then she says, "We have a wonderful dry cleaning service if you're so inclined." He says, "No, it's a birthmark," which was hilarious. I thought that was always the funniest line. But she ends up saying, and it's really funny, if you've ever actually been to the Mirage, which hopefully you had gone because now you can't, but she says,
First giant palm tree. You'll see a group of blackjack tables, not baccarat, not craps, blackjack. Take another right and then wind around to your left. If you get to the pool you've gone too far, back up and take another right. You'll see a bank of elevators. Those aren't your elevators. Stay away from them. But keep walking. You'll see another bank of elevators. The gold elevators, those are yours. Take them up to the 10th floor. Take a right at the end of the hallway. You'll find your room. Any questions?
that is actually exactly how it feels like to give a direction to somebody in one of our casinos. And she was very detailed, which when you worked in a hotel, so I used to work as a concierge at MGM Grand. For those of you that like just tuned into this podcast, I've probably said that about 1,000,000 times, but now you know, for the 1,000,000th time, that's where I worked. But giving directions to anything was always a challenge. And I really tried to sort of dumb it down to probably 2 or 3 directionals. So, like, for example, if you wanted to go out to the Strip, which we were located right by the elevators, which thank goodness for us, you basically walked out of the elevators and you saw the concierge desk, was fantastic. So, but if you wanted to walk over to the Strip, it was essentially you have to go make a right out of our office, go to Whiskey Down Bar, make another right, and you're going to follow the signs to Hakkasan. When you get to Hakkasan, that's where the doors are to go outside. Hakkasan's the nightclub. So it was really important to try to give directions that you would understand, because Whiskey Down had a sign in front of it when you walked out of our office, and then you make a right, obviously. And then above on all of the signage, there was always signs that said to certain places. For example, Hakkasan. Hakkasan had signs all the way. And then once you get there, you can see Hakkasan. It has a big giant sign in front of it as well. And then hopefully you're smart enough to figure out, oh, the exit is right there. So that was the best way that I can give directionals. And for those of you, any of you who are concierge listening to this or working in hotels, that is really the best way to give directions. I would say 3 directionals max, because anything more than that, people tune out. You totally forget. So again, we'll do it one more time just so I can sort of relive the days. If you're going to the Strip from the concierge desk at MGM Grand, at least the old one, you go out of our office to Whiskey Down, the bar, then you're going to make a right, and you're going to follow the signs to Hakkasan, and that'll be the exit. And hopefully that helps you get out from where you are at MGM Grand. I can honestly do that at any hotel. I think it's just ingrained in me. I've walked around many hotels, and I've been drinking and feel like being extra helpful. And I've been at the Wynn, for example, and I've been walking through, and someone just looks lost, and I say, "What are you looking for?" They'll say the front desk. I'll say, "You're going to go to that bar, make a right, and you'll be at the front desk." That's easy. Line of sight is really, really helpful. So back to sort of the movie thing, the way she described it, extremely accurate of how big and giant these hotels can definitely be. Last one from Vegas Vacation that I'd like to highlight is the Neon Museum. So back in the day when this movie was made, it was the Neon Boneyard, but now we've become fancy and called it a museum. It's actually moving. So they're going to be moving the Neon Museum closer to the Arts District, which I think is actually a very good idea. Honestly, the Neon Museum is in a really, really sketchy part of town. If you ask me, they do have a couple security guards. They have a bunch of gates, and if you need that much stuff for a tourist attraction, definitely should move it. But again, it was built when it wasn't a huge deal. It was basically a boneyard, but now it's become such a huge attraction that they're moving it to the Arts District, which has really seen a revitalization of that space. And I think will bring so many people to that area, which I think it just totally makes sense. But there is a scene where she's actually dancing on like a horse or dancing on top of another neon sign. You cannot do that anymore. You can never do that, actually. So don't look to be dancing at the Neon Museum. The funny thing about the Neon Museum is actually the Neon Museum has lots of rules, and people don't understand this. For example, if you want to go take pictures at the Neon Museum, you really can't take them at nighttime. It's also kind of impossible to take pictures in front of a neon sign unless you have a million just white spotlights on you, because your flash, however it is, with you in front of it, will either show up the sign or show you and not show both. So you need a lot of lights, and you need also like natural light as well. They do have this thing once a month, where you're able to actually go to the Neon Museum. You need to make a reservation for it. I think the tickets are for 2 people, because then it's you and the other person who takes a picture. And it's usually like a twilight time where you're able to take photos of the Neon Museum, take pictures of the neon signs with you in them, obviously. Not quite photo shoot. It's not like a photo shoot. So don't do that. I also don't believe it's anything promotional. Like if you're going to take a picture and then use it as like promotional material for like a auto care center or something, you can't do that. It's only for personal use. So they have lots of rules of how you can use this sort of time. But it's usually at twilight time. So it's usually like 5 or 6 o'clock, depending on when the sun goes down. They usually do that once a month, and I think it's usually on a Tuesday. And again, you just have to check and see when they're having that. But you can go in the daytime, which we are approaching like October, which it's fun to go see the neon signs in the daytime, which pictures look good. But honestly, at nighttime is the time to take pictures. If you're just taking pictures of the sign, the Neon Museum is best done at nighttime because, again, who wants to see an unlit neon sign? Not me. So the Neon Museum, honestly, it's a really small part of the movie where they're dancing and having like a nightclub, essentially, at the Neon Museum. Nah, that doesn't happen. Not at all. Although they do have special events there, like proms and things like that. So moving away from Vegas Vacation, which Vegas Vacation, great film, highly recommended if you want to come to Vegas and feel nostalgic. It's during the kid-friendly era of Las Vegas. That was sort of like the mid 1990s, which obviously not here anymore. So moving away from kid-friendly Las Vegas on to one of my more depressing things on the list, and that is Leaving Las Vegas. This is the Oscar-nominated, Oscar-winning, thank you very much, Nicolas Cage, and Oscar-nominated Elizabeth Shue. This wonderful film about a gentleman who is down on his luck, lost his family, he was a screen reader or writer in Los Angeles, moves to Las Vegas so he can drink himself to death and die in Las Vegas. So if you didn't think that was depressing, man, be careful. But Leaving Las Vegas is actually a very, very good film. It also takes place during the 90s, which this is actually kind of a funny sort of juxtaposition of these two eras. Because honestly, Vegas Vacation is only like maybe 3 or 4 years after the movie Leaving Las Vegas was made. Leaving Las Vegas, I believe, is 1993, 1994, and then Vegas Vacation came out in, I believe, 1996. So now I want to check it because I'm one of those people that wants to be right about these things. But in Leaving Las Vegas, there's not a lot of things I want to really describe in the movie because they're not very nice things. But one of them being is, do people do that? Do people come to Las Vegas to drink themselves to death? This would be a really good episode to have Ryan Hunter on. And when he comes on again, which he does, he's on an episode before us, a couple episodes, talking about, he really knows a lot about this stuff, but I can say that every time we would, be walking in the back of the back halls of MGM, we get a lot of ambulances that come through the back and go up to the top rooms, and you never really saw things come down. So just know that has happened before. It does happen a lot more than you think, but don't let it sort of freak you out about Las Vegas. So I did check it. Vegas Vacation came out in 1997. Leaving Las Vegas came out in 1995. So these movies are very, very close together when they were filmed, but totally different tones for both of these. Also, Vegas Vacation, much bigger budget. Leaving Las Vegas, very low budget. They actually didn't have the rights to film in front of the Bally's Hotel, which you see that's where Nicolas Cage picks up Elizabeth Shue. There's also a scene where they're driving and they're in front of the Desert Inn, which they also did not have the rights to film there. But you do it and see what happens. But the one scene I really wanted to point out in this particular episode was a scene where Elizabeth Shue is actually inside of a hotel, and she's trying to pick up what we call a John in the biz. She is a prostitute in this particular film, and he's just there alone. He's here for a convention. She kind of knows that, but it's also like kind of a generic open to anything like this. And she's semi-classy lady of the night. She walks up and says,
Hi.
Hi.
How you doing?
Doing fine, thank you.
So are you here for the convention?
Damn, I shouldn't think I was that obvious.
Oh no. No, it's just a wild guess.
My name's Paul.
Hi.
Vodka 7.
Vodka soda. And for the lady?
You ready for another one?
Sure. I'll have a margarita.
Good choice.
So are you alone? Or are you just using me to make someone else jealous?
Alone. I'm here alone. Thank you. Cheers.
Where are you staying?
Right here at the Hotel Wine.
Thought maybe we might be looking for a date.
A date? What are you, a hooker? What exactly do you mean by a date? I got a wife waiting for me at home. I just came over to talk for a few minutes,
I'm
that's all.
sorry, okay? I guess I misunderstood.
Yeah, I guess you did.
Would you please just keep your voice down? I promise you I won't bother you again.
Here, have another one on me.
This does happen. This actually still happens. It's very different nowadays. It depends. A lot of times, ladies or workers work in pairs. So usually there's two of them, and usually they'll go to bars in the center part of the hotels. Reason being, it's just much more populated. Typically, this is where you get a lot more people. It's a little bit more natural to be sort of lost in this crowd, but it's sort of not like a nightclub where you can't discuss business. It's essentially a place where you are using the camouflage of having lots of people, but also sort of like it's a stocked pond, if you will, if you're looking for clients. So it's kind of safe. It's a really good place to find people. So it happens. It definitely happens. Does it happen this way anymore? It's a little bit different. Obviously, you have to sort of check out the clues. If you ever see a woman by herself in Las Vegas, and again, these are generalities, but again, this happens. So I'm sorry if those of you that don't like me stereotyping, but this happens. I could even do more, but I didn't. But typically, they're by themselves. They typically look like they're going to a nightclub, or they're dressed up, or it's very sexily dressed. Which again, it's Vegas and people dress sexy all the time, but there are certain clues that you can tell. Most women in Las Vegas, especially if they're by themselves, typically will not start a conversation with you. It's very, very rare that they will start a conversation with you out of the blue. And again, if you look like, let's just say Channing Tatum, maybe they do talk to you. But I've lived in Las Vegas for 12 years now, been going out pretty consistently every week for the past, at least 3 or 4, 3 years doing this podcast. And it doesn't happen very often. You can tell though, like you can always tell, like if they're a little bit vague with their backstory, if they're not very detailed, it's very rare. So you do get women who come to Vegas on their own. So don't let this sort of like paint any woman who comes to Las Vegas on their own as, oh my goodness, I'm not a prostitute. There are signs about it. You usually get, especially with men or women who travel on their own, usually you can tell when they're married. You can usually tell if they're single. They usually are a little bit more willing to buy drinks at the bar. Prostitutes in Vegas do not buy a lot of drinks at bars. They have one drink maybe. It's usually a clear drink. It's usually like vodka soda. It's usually a gin and soda. Gin and soda is it's interesting. Cranberry vodka. No, these are very basic drinks. And again, these are the drinks that they order. So just keep that in mind. Be careful. This does still happen. This is the oldest profession for a reason. So just keep an eye out while you're out in town. So we're moving away from Leaving Las Vegas. Great film. I'd highly recommend it, especially if you're in the right frame of mind to actually watch it. But it's a really good film. So moving on. The movie 21. The movie 21 is actually the movie that really got me excited about Las Vegas. I actually reviewed this movie in high school, and I loved it. And I was like, I had to be 15 or 16, and I've been to Vegas a lot at that point in my life, and I thought this movie was awesome. So I loved the movie 21. And the movie 21 came out at a time when Vegas was really the happening place, and it really came through in a lot of movies that this was like my era, which I think we're out of that era, unfortunately. But things that happened in the movie, card counters are a real thing. You can, if you're like an amateur card player, you typically won't be able to find it, but people who work in casinos, so blackjack dealers, supervisors, the eye in the sky, we can usually pick out, we can usually pick out if someone's a card counter or not. It's how they bet. People always say, like, how do you catch them? It's how people bet. Typically, somebody who bets $15 does not bet $300, on average. Like if you're playing $15, and then just say 300, and then you win, and then you go back to 20, and then you go to 500, and then you win. That's sort of a trend that we can pick up on. But most of the time they're unsuccessful, so we usually don't call out the card counters who are at least trying to count cards. And if anything, we'll just say we just don't want your business. But this movie itself took place In the movie itself, it actually takes place in the 2000s, but the actual time frame of this film that was based on the book called Bringing Down the House, that movie, book was actually written for the MIT card counting team, which there were actually 2 card counting teams. They had different names. The Chameleons, they had a different one. And that took place in the late 80s into the 90s, which was actually a really sweet spot for card counting because back in the day, which we'll talk about the movie that this would make sense later, that was a time when the mob was really pushed out of Las Vegas. Vegas had become more corporatized. They kind of the technology wasn't good enough to try to catch repeat people into the business. It wasn't like we couldn't catch card counters. We couldn't identify them over and over and over at different casinos because they would wear disguises and wigs and all that, and that's really what it was. So that was really a sweet spot in time of why they were successful. And honestly, they got themselves in trouble because of what they did outside of the casino, not at the tables. They would buy lavish things. They would do bottle service. Well, they would buy lots of drinks at certain places. They didn't have a lot of like crazy nightclubs. But it was the things they did. They would buy, extravagant dinners and cars and all these things. And that's what got them in trouble in Las Vegas. So really, it was their extracurriculars, not the stuff they did at the tables, that got them in trouble. But one of the sort of themes of the movie that I really enjoy, which is depicted very well, is you can be whoever you want when you come to Las Vegas. So these guys were, nerds in in Boston and Cambridge, and they're nerds. They're not cool. They're losers. But when they come to Las Vegas, you dress it up, look however you want, and you can be whoever you want, which I think that's a great sentiment when you guys come to Las Vegas is don't think about, hey, I have to be respectable. This is who I am back home in Connecticut. But when you come here, nobody knows who you are. Like when you're a couple, you guys can be from wherever you want. You can be oil men and women from Texas. You can be pharmaceutical salesmen from Minnesota. Who cares? Be whoever you want. Obviously, as long as it's safe and you're not, endangering other people. But build a story for yourself and have a good time while you're here because no one's going to know you and no one's going to care. I've never met a bartender or a waiter or waitress judge anybody for coming to our wonderful city. So that's what I love from that movie. So speaking of card counters, which back in the day, people always thought card counting was cheating, let's talk about the movie Casino. So Casino is a benchmark Vegas movie. This movie itself really depicts what Vegas was like in the 1970s specifically, which is sort of the end of the era of the mob in Las Vegas. They sort of were around in the 80s, but really Vegas in the 80s up until 1989 was really lost. It didn't know what they were. They really just were sort of like trying to figure out who should own these properties, who should be in charge, how are we going to become a more legitimate business. So the 80s were kind of weird, but the Casino takes place in the late 60s, 70s, into the fall of the mob in Las Vegas in the late 1970s into the 80s. So a couple of things from the movie that are really fun to sort of talk about. There's a scene that depicts the skim, which is very early in the film where they talk about the count room and how a guy comes and grabs a bag and then they cut it off the top and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to talk about that, but it did happen, and you can actually go see it at the Mob Museum. They actually have that scene depicted as an example of how the skim worked in Las Vegas. But a scene that I caught my eye when I was watching this the last time was there was this guy with his feet up on the poker table.
Sir, would you mind taking your feet off the table and put your shoes on, please?
Yeah, I would mind. I'm having a bad night.
Fucking asshole, won't budge.
Full security.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. You want to do me a favor? You want to take your feet off the table and put your shoes back on? Fuck you. I want you to exit this guy off the premises, and I want you to exit him off his feet and use his head to open the fucking door.
Sir, you're gonna have to leave. You mind accompanying us outside?
Bullshit, I ain't going anywhere with you.
Bullshit, you're out of here.
Fuck you! Fuck you! You know who you're fucking with? Huh? Do you know who you're fucking with? Leave me alone! Here we go. You're fucking kidding me!
Sure enough, an hour later, I get the call.
So you would say, God, what kind of person who grew up in a barn puts their feet up on a table in general out in public? Well, I have actually seen this multiple times. It was at a slot machine, and honestly, guys, I feel like I wish I had the nerve of Frank Lefty Rosenthal's guys to push his feet off of the slot machine and say, "Get the hell out of here, cowboy," and then exit on their feet and use his head to open the door. Great line, but it happens, and it's just so annoying. It just brings down sort of the level of class in the place. I don't care who you are. Don't do it. This is not your house. Essentially, slot machines are not like put your foot up furniture. You have to think of it as people put their hands on it, people play there, and you just don't want to look like, honestly, a slob. Don't be this person. Honestly, when we see you, I always tell people when you come to Las Vegas, you're Frank Sinatra, you're Marilyn Monroe, you look like a piece of shit. If you're doing that, stop doing it. It's just absolutely ridiculous. The feet on the table, and you got to take them off. There's another scene in the movie where they catch a cheater and they take him in back and break his hand with a pinball hammer. We don't do that anymore, as hopefully most of you knew that. Yeah, it's fun to think about. It is really fun to think about. But we do have rooms in our in the back. We have back rooms in the hotels. They don't have cameras. They're like conference rooms. But typically we don't intimidate that way. We find it's a lot easier to just 86 you, which is, fun fact, the term 86th, which in this movie we do have a scene where Joe Pesci talks about taking people out in the desert.
Got a lot of holes in the desert, and a lot of problems are buried in those holes. Except you got to do it right. I mean, you got to have the hole already dug before you show up with a package in the trunk. Otherwise, you're talking about a half hour or 45 minutes to dig it. And who knows who's going to be coming along in that time. Before you know it, you got to dig a few more holes. You could be there all fucking night.
And the whole thing with being 86th was that they would take you out in the desert, dig a hole, 8 feet deep, 6 feet wide. You can mess with the dimensions if you want, and then put you in it. So that's how you get 86th out of the hotel. That's how to take care of an old problem or a new problem. You'd be 86. So I always forget if it's 8 feet wide or 8 feet long and 6 feet deep. Always forget. But, you just got to fix those dimensions. But then you find out that we just take them out to Lake Mead. It doesn't matter anymore. Still a thing. Actually, not still a thing, but we still find all those problems. So anyways, that is where the term 86 came from. And it's even more interesting now because if you get 86 out of a hotel where they just do not come in, your trespass is what we like to call it. We don't say 86 anymore. But you're trespassed. You are trespassed of every property that hotel owns. So, for example, if you get 86 out of MGM's properties, you cannot go to essentially half of the hotels on the Las Vegas Strip. So, keep that in mind next time you want to be crazy or an idiot inside of one of their properties, all right? So, just be careful. So, a lot of things in casino that we can talk about. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but there are certain things like those ones in particular that you should try to avoid doing in hotels. Oh, we don't zap people with cattle prods anymore, which that was quite fun to watch. We have a lot of movies to go through, so we're going to continue going. This is going to be an extra long podcast for everybody. So I'm sorry if you like these short pods. This is going to be a long one because I'm very excited about this particular category, this particular episode. So let's talk about one of my favorite movies, the one that really made me think about Las Vegas when I was a kid, and that is Ocean's 11. And this is one with George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon. That's the good one. Honestly, guys, anybody who says the original with Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, the boys, it's not a good movie. It's just cool because those guys are in it. But it's not a good film. Nobody thinks that's a good movie. Ocean's 11, George Clooney, Matt Damon, Brad Pitt, that's the good one. So Ocean's 11, there's a couple of things. I mentioned the back rooms already, so we're not going to talk about that. Let's actually talk about a scene that happens in the movie that has actually happened to me in real life, and that is the lights going out in the casino. So I've actually been part of this at least 3 times, and everyone thinks, when the lights turn off in a casino, that then it's just chaos. People jumping over the tables, grabbing all the chips, running out the door, people pushing people all over the place, people pushing the dealers all the way. It does not happen like that. So this actually has happened to me 3 times at the Circa Hotel where the lights will turn off. I was in the casino when it happened, and nothing happens. We essentially stop play just because we have to be able to see the hands that are going on. But usually lights will turn on. It's not like a full shutdown, but lights will turn on. The TVs usually go off. That's usually what happens. There's a big giant TV at Circa, if you mentioned. We are actual electricity supply in the control room still worked during one of these things. So the lights would go, all the lights would go off. They'd turn back on, and boom, we had a show. But nothing happens. No one's running anywhere. No one's moving. They don't shut down you coming in. So don't. I think that's always funny when it happens in the movie and everyone freaks out. It doesn't happen that way. So if you were looking to turn off the lights in a casino, nothing's probably going to happen. So yeah. Keep that in mind. So we'll move on just because that was the really big one from Ocean's 11 that I wanted to talk about. Let's talk about it. Oh, by the way, in Ocean's 11, this is another thing. They have key cards that they have to get into the back of the hotels. We really don't have a lot of key cards anymore, although I can't say that. We do have key cards. But when I was working at MGM Grand, we did have passcodes, which we really didn't need until later when I was working there, but you were able to walk in the back. And I'm not going to tell you that you can just wear a suit and walk in the back halls and kind of do wherever you want. You're going to get lost at some point while you're back there, so hopefully you have a goal while you're back there. But if you're wearing a suit and you look like you're supposed to be there, we typically won't bother you. That's, I know, a silly thing to think about, but that is certainly a thing that's happened. So moving on, let's talk about Indecent Proposal. Indecent Proposal, one of the best bad movies that I've ever watched. Indecent Proposal is really good as long as they're in the city of Las Vegas. Once they leave and go back to California, and Robert Redford is trying to has seduced Demi Moore, and Woody Harrelson is in there buying hippos for her and properties. The movie sucks. But for the little second that they are in Las Vegas is so much fun. So there's a part where they're walking around, and again, this happens all the time. People come to Las Vegas, try to win money to go back home. Do not do that. Very bad idea. But they've lost all their money. They're walking around the casino. They walk and go by the high limit. A couple of things in the movie about Indecent Proposal and the high limit tables. I believe his name is John Gage, is Robert Redford's character, and he is looking out to the casino. Somebody who's betting the amount of money that John Gage is betting, which it was about $10,000, $100,000 a hand, would not be able to be seen from the public, from the high limit. It was almost like a stadium-style seating to watch him play. Typically, high rollers do not play there. They will play in what's called salons. Salons are private areas, private rooms inside of the high limit. So it's sort of like a room inside of a room of where you would actually find these guys. And that's the only place that they would play. Maybe they'll play craps out in public, but he was playing Baccarat, and he was down $1 million at that point. But other than just the actual space where he was, which was out in the public, you can see him from, the walking by, they would never have the table set up the way they have it in the film. In the film, they have it so he's looking out towards the casino. Most high rollers will like their back to the public. They want their back facing the entrances of any room that they're in. We don't know why. Obviously, it could be because they don't want to be seen. They don't want people to see their faces. And if you didn't know who that was, then you probably wouldn't stand by them. So typically, you will not have high rollers with their eyes looking out of the room. They will always have their eyes looking into the room with their back to the door. So that's one thing. But also, not uncommon is for somebody to say, "Can I borrow your wife?" Which, hey, it's Vegas. Do whatever you'd like. But really, so in the movie, he says, "Hey, can I borrow your wife?" They go and they play craps. She gets the dice and throws the dice. Women playing craps is actually kind of a lucky thing. If you've ever heard the song Luck Be a Lady, that's by Frank Sinatra. He says in the live recordings that song is about a pair of dice, and being a lady is the stand-in. So women tend to do very well playing craps, and it's happened before where you'll toss money towards women who are throwing the dice, doing a good job. You want them to keep going. Lady Luck is a real thing until it's not. But one of the things that she does in the movie that I'd like to correct is that they send her the dice. They have $1 million on the line, which is the pass line, it's the come out roll. So on the come out roll, she wants to throw a 7 or an 11. A 7 or an 11. We throw a 7 or 11. It's like hitting a home run. You win 1-to-1, even money. That's how much money you win. So you bet $1 million, you win $1 million. That's the way that it works. If you hit the points, then obviously those become the point. You got to hit those numbers, but we won't get too complicated. So he says in the movie, if you could throw a 7 or an 11, that'd be fantastic. And they toss her the dice or roll, push the dice towards her. She grabs the dice. And he says, "Are you forgetting something?" And then she kisses them and then throws the dice. We would probably not allow that. Again, we're talking in the $1 million range for the bet. He's a well-known player. So maybe we let him get away with it. But I would say 90% of the time, we are not letting them alter anything, especially with $1 million on the line. So she kisses the dice, throws them, a 7 comes up, and everybody gets excited. The pit boss gets pissed off. But the funniest thing about this is, earlier in the movie, they say that he's down $1 million. He's already lost $1 million. And then he takes out credit, which is another $1 million. He wins, so he just wins $1 million back. Like, he just broke even. Like, he didn't win any, extra money. It's essentially, he just made back the money he lost. So, what can you do? Also, no tip. Like there's no tip out of that. She hit the number, and we're all excited about it. And they were still going to go back to California with zero money. This would obviously, a gentleman who's like this, which, I mean, he gave her the tip in another way. He would have gave her $1 million back. I don't know, gave her 10,000. That's 10%. Or 1%? I don't know how to do math. But I mean, I could see him giving $10,000 or $20,000 for winning $1 million. I could see it happening. He's a billionaire. But again, it's the movie. Also in the movie, there's a scene where they go up and they have a rich person party on the top of the hotel. It used to be called the Hilton back in the day when that movie was going on. And it was most likely going to be in the Elvis suite, or a suite like Elvis's suite. And it's just a piano player and people dressed up in bow ties and dresses. That doesn't happen anymore. It's very rare, people dressing up that way. It's very, very rare for that to happen, especially if you go to an expensive hotel like the Wynn. You'd think people would dress up there. Never happens. It's just one of those things. Also, pianos in rooms, it's very rare. There was only, at MGM, we had the Skylofts, and the Skylofts was the high-end part of the hotel, which it was kind of funny. Skylofts, which is the last 2 floors of the MGM Grand, those rooms, 85% of them were all comped. It was very rare that somebody paid to stay in those rooms. So they were comped because it was casino players betting a lot of money. So just keep that in mind. But only I think we only had one. We had 2 that were large enough to have a piano, and one of them actually had a piano in there. The reason for the piano is, 1, it's cool. But 2, we would use it for people to rehearse for if they were going to be performing downstairs anywhere, in the, the Grammys or something. They would have them there. But that's neither here nor there. So that was Anita's proposal. Let's talk about Showgirls really quick. Showgirls, kind of a classic nowadays. Obviously, I know the history of the movie Showgirls with Christina Brinkley. Everybody thinks it's terrible. They say, "Oh my God, what a bad movie." But after living in Las Vegas, which there are scenes where it's just a lot of very extra. It's God, that's weird. But there are parts of the movie that are Vegas related that are actually very good, and I think like the cattiness between people who work in show business in Vegas, and it's like the next person up and just trying to get ahead. A lot of people have worked in the adult business in this town and gone like legit. For example, in the movie, she works as a stripper, and then she becomes cast in one of the showgirl shows, which were really big during the 90s. Think like Jubilee and that kind of thing. And it happens. Like that's the way things happen in this town. Is like there's so many people who are like teachers in the day. This is an extreme example, but they're teachers in the daytime and also strippers at night. Like it happens that way. I don't know why. It's just, hey, like it's there. This town is probably one of the top 3 stripper destination working places in America, and you're just trying to get some of that money, and it's just one of those things that happens. So there are scenes in the movie where she has to audition. Some people come to Vegas to be like cocktail waitresses and find out that being a cocktail waitress is actually kind of hard to get, especially at a good property. But there are scenes in that movie, Showgirls, that is actually quite believable. She does lick the pole. She licks the pole in the movie at a strip club. Never seen that. So hopefully you don't see that, because that would be a little extra. But fun. They filmed it in Las Vegas, which was cool. They go and eat at Spago, which it's not named, but Spago, which is now Spago is now Water Grill, I want to say. And it was a very, very popular spot. You could still go eat at a Spago in Vegas. It's at Bellagio. But in the movie, she's like, "Oh, thank you for my dress. It's a Versace."
Nice dress.
Thanks. I bought it at Versace.
So funny. So funny to hear her say Versace every single time. But yes, they filmed a lot of it on location, including the Pepper Mill. They did film in front of the Pepper Mill as well, which was cool. The movie that they're at, the location that they're at in the movie, for those of you wondering, is the Stardust. It was the actual Stardust back in the day, which is a very, very big hotel in the city for a very, very long time, especially during the 80s, which is really its height was in the 80s. So we finally made it. We made it to the last one on my list. There's so many more movies about Vegas that I wish I could talk about, but we're approaching an hour, and I know everyone's trying to get out of here. So hopefully this was like a long listen for a lot of people. So The Hangover. Let's talk about The Hangover. It's the one movie I haven't talked about yet. So what I love about The Hangover is that they really capture what it's like to drive into Las Vegas and be super excited coming into the city. It's this really, really great feeling when you're coming over, because when you're coming from LA, most of you know this who are from Los Angeles or San Diego or whatever, you're driving on the freeway and then you're just kind of driving. It starts to turn a little bit. It just sort of starts to turn, and you're on like this hill that's going up, and then there's like these little rock formations. And as you get up that hill and past those rock formations, there's the city just in the distance. And you're here. You know you're right there, because at that point, you know you're in Vegas. You made it. If you break down, the tow truck is very close by. But really gets the feeling of coming into Vegas on like a Friday night, and you're gonna attack the city. And I love the montage of when they're driving into they're in Las Vegas, they're pulling into Caesars, and it just feels like you're ready for a great night.
Actually, I was wondering if you had any villas available.
Phil, we're not even going to be in the room.
It's unnecessary.
It's no big deal. We can share beds one night.
If we're sharing beds, I'm bucking with Phil.
Lisa, I apologize. How much is the villa?
Well, we have one villa available, and it's $4,200 for the night.
Is it awesome?
It's pretty awesome.
Can I ask you another question?
Sure.
You probably get this a lot. This isn't the real Caesar's Palace, is it?
What do you mean?
Did Caesar live here?
No.
I didn't think so.
If you go into Caesar's Palace and say, "Did Caesar live here?" nobody laughs. Absolutely nobody laughs. You can ask it. And if you get a funny person, they'll say, "Oh, I heard that one before." They absolutely hate that question because of this movie. But there's a scene in the movie at the front desk where they say, "Hey, I was wondering if you have any villas available," which, if it's not a busy night, we might have villas available. We actually have quite a lot of villas available because they're very, very expensive. We usually give them out to players. But if a villa is available, Most villas, per night, depending on how many rooms it has, what location it is, what property, most villas do range between like $3,000 and I've seen villas all the way up to $20,000. So the $20,000 ones are very, very big. They're very, very large. They had one at the Mansion Casino, or the Mansion at MGM, which was like an entire floor. Like it was the entire third floor of one of their wings, and it had like a swimming pool. It had its own swimming pool along with the Mansion swimming pool. It has a gym. It has, I believe, 3 or 4 rooms, which had other beds in it. They had a living room. They had, I think they had one more space. But it's basically like an Italian villa inside of a hotel. Well, outside of the hotel, because the mansion is sort of a secret. But that would go between $15,000 and $20,000 a night. So you usually weren't there for very long. But that usually came with butler service. It came with a chef, 24-hour chef, all these fun things. So yes, I've seen rooms all the way up to $20,000. So I would say, depending on the rooms, I think it was $4,200 a night is what she said it was, or $3,600 a night. It was around $4,000, which pretty normal. Like if you get like a 2-bedroom, if you get like a 2-bedroom villa or suite like that, I could see it between $3,000 and $4,000 for sure. The Sky Lofts, you had 1-bedrooms, 2-bedrooms, and I think they had 2 3-bedroom villas or lofts is what we called them. The most common one was the 2-bedroom villas, and they were 2 floors. All of them were duplexes. They usually had 2 beds in one room and then like a master in the other. So they can usually fit up to like 8 to 10 people, because then the living space, which are very large, those were able to turn into beds. So that was possible. But yeah, it's super possible that they would be able to get one, because hey, we like free money. So yes, it's very possible that Bradley Cooper could have came in with his crew and said, hey, can we have any villas? And boom, villa. There's also a deposit, so it was very, very expensive. And then they ruined it, so that room probably set them back probably $15,000 to $20,000. And no one ever says this. They stayed an extra night, so they had that room for 2 nights, plus all the damage. Very, very expensive trip to Las Vegas for those guys. There's also a scene in the movie where they get married. So yes, as long as you get the marriage certificate, which our marriage office is open until midnight, you can get the certificate and then you can actually get married at the wedding office if you really wanted to. But you get the wedding certificate, which I think is $60 nowadays, and go to a wedding chapel, which there is one quite close to. There's actually one across the street. There's actually 3 across the street from the actual marriage office, and get married. You can walk in. They usually want you to reserve a time, and it is very serious. Most Vegas wedding spots do not allow you to use the space or get married unless it's legal. So you can't just like, hey, look, I'm taking a picture. They don't let you do that anymore. I don't think they ever let you do that. But you have to be either getting a wedding renewal or you're getting married for the first time. So it is very serious. But yes, it is very possible. So I know in the movie, I think some places will do both, which is actually very hard to do. Like there's like 2 or 3 places that let you do that. I think Vegas weddings, which is right next to the wedding office, does allow you to register your wedding license and then also get married at the same place, which, interesting, very different. That is not the courthouse. But yes, very possible to do that. Last one, let's talk about the roof. So a really big part of this is that they were able to get on top of the roof. I think most people understand this is not possible. A lot of safety things are required for that. So I think this is an easy one to know that, yeah, you're not getting on the roof. And if you did, there's a lot of cameras up there. And honestly, a lot of people would probably see you and would have pointed it out. But hey, that makes a really shitty movie. So just defy belief for a while and just watch the movie and have a good time. But that is all the time we have for this episode. This was an hour episode. We haven't done one of those in a very long time, but hopefully you guys had a lot of fun. I had so much fun doing this particular episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I know it was a lot more like, hey, can you do this in Vegas? And not a lot of recommendations, but that was what the first half of the pod was for. So Thank you so much for everybody for listening. Follow us on TikTok at Keys to Vegas, on Instagram, conciergeconfidential_LV. Looks like I got to follow like as I was doing this because I've been on for so long. Maybe it's a request, and we'll talk about that, if it comes up and it's a good one. So thanks again for listening. Really appreciate it. Make sure if you come out in town, come out and say hello. A lot of places I like to hang out are the Collins Bar and the Mayfair Supper Club, as well as the wonderful and beautiful Delilah's. If you see me out in town, feel free to come say hello. But just remember, keep it confidential.